Well, welcome, Mr. Justin Giboney. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with me this morning and chat with the Student Dream community. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Nina, thanks for having me. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, so I briefly introduced folks to you, but I'd love to just give you that opportunity to share a bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. I'm now in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm married with 3 kids, and I'm an attorney. But I've been doing political strategy for, like you said, over a decade. And so I've run campaigns. I do kind of political advisor type stuff, and just really into politics and policy in the way that it shapes in many ways society.
I love it. And can you tell me just how you got into that? Because I think for so many young people listening, they may have different interests and asking themselves, how do I know what I really want to focus on? I'd love to hear a bit about how you got into that and decided to focus on it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've always kind of been interested. I like political biography, so I always like reading about presidents and things of that nature. Once I graduated from law school, I came down to Atlanta. I was working at a law firm, and I had a group of guys who we used to always come together and just talk about politics. We talk about what's going on. And then one day I looked and I said, why are we being so academic about this, right? We actually should be in the game. So why don't we get in the game? Why don't we join the community? And so the mayor's race in Atlanta was coming up. We did our research. We actually did memos on each candidate to see which one we thought was the best. There was a state senator at the time named Mayor Kasim Reed, who had done some extraordinary things. He went to Howard University.
Yeah, my alumni.
Yeah, that's right. And we just thought he was the best candidate. So we literally, went up to kind of his campaign and say, hey, how can we help? And we started from the bottom. I mean, I was an attorney, but I started kind of knocking on doors, just going to events. And, this was when not many people really even knew who he was outside of, his district, not the whole city. And so we just ended up working, showed that we were hard workers, showed that we were loyal and committed, and ended up doing debate prep and speaking on his behalf when he couldn't show up to places. And he ended up winning. And that was kind of the beginning of it. From there, I started running campaigns, a lot of local campaigns, some state stuff, and just kind of went on from there.
And that's so fascinating. One of the things you mentioned was that we thought he was a good candidate. And in the age of so much information, obviously candidates wanting to win a race, one candidate says, you're bad. The other says, no, I'm good, you're bad. How did you come to that conclusion and form your own opinion that, hey, this is a good candidate?
Yeah, we just had to do our due diligence, right? You can't always listen to what one campaign or the other is saying. Sometimes you have to look at the records for yourself. You have to do the research for yourself. And we just dug into it. We say, okay, not only, what is he saying, but what can we see that he's accomplished? What is his reputation around the state house and the state senate and things of that nature. So you really just have to kind of dig into it. It's much easier to do on a local level. And that's why I tell people, we tend to focus on national politics, but there's a lot going on the local level, and you have an opportunity to really feel around and get a better feel for what people are about. But it's really just about due diligence and taking your time to kind of get to know the candidate.
That's good. And I just turned 30 this year. A lot of our audience, they are in their early 20s, and just, again, not always thinking for ourselves, unfortunately, specifically, and don't always see the value of politics. Can you break down for me, what really is the power of politics?
Well, I always say, politics touches every aspect of life, from what you eat to what you learn, what's in the food you eat, right? To what you learn in school, to how much you pay in taxes, to how hard it is for you to start a business. What does it take for you to get a business license? What does it take for you to maintain a business? All of these things are touched by politics. And so I think we do ourselves a huge disservice when we're not engaged, because it means that somebody else is weighing in on an issue and we're not at the table. And so we're not helping ourselves out when we say, hey, I'm just not going to participate. You're actually just giving somebody else more influence over your life. And so I think it's very important for us to understand that it impacts everything. There's nothing that's not in some way. And I often challenge people, say, name one thing that's not somehow impacted by politics. And somebody will say, well, maybe my church. And I said, no, your church is also impacted by politics.
Wow.
Whether it's the values that they, profess, or when they can meet, or what's considered, to be a religious institution. Those all are decisions that are made by government. And so we need to be engaged.
That's so good. And when you think about, obviously you've been in this space for a while now, when you were first getting started, looking back, what is one thing that you wish you knew when you first got started?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the one thing I wish I would have focused on more early on, because I didn't do everything right when I started off, was the human element of politics. That policy has skin. And I think early on for me, and one of the things I try to correct for other people, is it kind of became about winning, right? And so, it didn't matter as much how I won, as long as I won. And I knew that people valued political operatives that were just willing to do whatever they needed to do to win. And I think people can get hurt that way. And so I would just tell people, get into it for the people. I had some great mentors that kind of corrected that and said, hey, no, this is about the people. You have to serve the people first and want to serve the people to be involved in politics, because you can very easily get into a situation where you become a part, of corruption and things like that. And thankfully, God's will, I avoided all that, and I kind of had a core that didn't allow me to go there. But I'm not necessarily proud of how I addressed other candidates, or things that were said. So keep your integrity, do it for the people, and you can have a very solid career, and you can just help a lot of people, but do it for the people. There's a saying that there's two types of people in politics: people that got into politics to be something, and people who got into politics to do something. And I would encourage folks to be that kind of person. Go into politics to get something done, not to make yourself big.
That's good. And so now, I mean, obviously, considering the current situation, it is May 29th, 2020. We are in a current state of affairs where the people need a lot of support and help. And we've seen so many different policies passed on a federal level, on a state and local level. Thinking about the college students who are navigating this world right now, how would you, what would you say are some issues that they need to be advocating for currently?
Yeah, I think one of the huge issues that we all need to be aware of, especially if you live in a big city, in a big urban center, is housing. Housing is a very critical issue that I think a lot of big cities have gotten wrong. If not most big cities have gotten wrong.
I'm in Brooklyn.
You go to places like San Francisco, Seattle. The only way that poor people can live in the city is if they're living on the streets. And that's not right. All right. So for people who consider themselves to be progressive or whatever, we should be doing better. And so I think for those who are in a city or near a big city, housing is a major issue. I mean, it's something essential that people need. And we have to realize that when people can't afford to live in the urban center, they have to go further out, and there's less resources there. There's less jobs there. And so their children suffer, and they just suffer in a lot of different ways. And so housing is an issue that we here in Atlanta have really been focused on, and are trying to make some changes there. And so I'd love to aggravated by the crisis too, right? The crisis.
And I'd love to go into that a bit deeper, because when it comes to issues, especially when you're faced with mountains like that, obviously we're believers. So it's like, hey, we can do this. God can do this. But the question is, where do you start with, kind of chipping away at that issue? Yeah. That's so big.
You always have to start by doing your due diligence and making sure that you're informed on an issue.
That's good.
It hurts me to tell you how many people that you see talking about certain issues really haven't done their homework. If you ask them a question outside of the talking points that they've heard for somebody else, they can't answer it. And before you get into any situation, into any issue, I often create like a 5 to 10 page, document and notes that I have to master, and just kind of master those facts before I even start talking about any of that stuff. So I would say that. I would say do your research, create a document that's probably 5 to 10 pages, and master those facts. And make sure you're getting to the facts. Make sure you're not just using somebody's propaganda. Get to the fact and kind of form your opinion based on hearing both sides of the conversation. Because a lot of times we can get into an issue and we're on the wrong side of it, and we don't know it because we've been kind of hearing a lot of propaganda and we haven't thought it through for ourselves. So know your values, know the framework by which you should make a decision, and do your research.
That's good. And what what are your go-to tools when it comes to due diligence and research? Because again, it's like, man, what do I believe? Can I believe CNN? Can I believe Fox? Can I believe Al Jazeera? You know?
One thing great about the internet is you can look up, you can look things up, and I would try to use, known sources. And so I would just find as much information in books, right? Find as many books on it as you can find, and just read through it. Don't be afraid to hear a point of view that you think you may not agree with, because you might be surprised. And so, I would go to the library. I would read, articles.
Say that again, library, y'all. We got to read. We got to read.
I would read as many articles on it as I could, and just just go from there. And like I said, create that document and then master the facts. So you can speak on.
That's so helpful, because I said that a bit in jest reading, but I think one of the lost arts is that in my generation, you may be at the end of the millennials, I believe, that we forgot that you have to read. We can't just digest of everything in a 5-minute article or 5-minute snippet or newsletter. We have to do that due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, and so many times, and this in business, we're looking for a competitive advantage. There's no competitive advantage like reading. So if you want to get ahead of the competition, if you want to make sure that you kind of stand out, and when questions are asked, you can speak to it on a level that is beyond what most people can, read. Anybody, when young people come to me and say they want to be in politics, I give them a couple books and I say, you read these books and then we can have a conversation, because that's how I know you're serious. That's how I know that you're really in it and you're a student of what you do. And so whether it's politics or business or anything else, be a student of what you do. If you're not reading articles about it every day, you're not, you're looking for books to learn more about it, then, you should question how serious you are about it. Learn about it. I mean, it's there. And if you want a competitive advantage, you ain't got to be rich. You ain't got to do any of that stuff. You can find information and learn and kind of become an expert on a lot of things if you take the time.
That's so good. And you talk about being a student of what you do, and you were a student athlete at Vanderbilt, right? That's a D1 school, man. I love basketball and sports. I used to follow Vanderbilt basketball. What position did you play?
So I was playing football. I was a safety in football.
Okay. So I always love the analogies that we can draw from with sports to real world in terms of training. Yeah. And so I'm sure you had specific workouts and training to really play your position to the highest level. What has that similar training looked like for you as you've gone on to start your own, create your own organization, become an attorney, and really lead well in this political landscape? What does that training look like for you?
That's a great question. And I think, what I did in football kind of works for what I do now too, and just anything in life. And I think there's kind of like three phases. I think when you want to do something, the first thing you got to do is observe. So practicing isn't necessarily even the first thing you do. It's the observation. So if I want to do a drill or I want to be good at a certain technique, the first thing I need to do is observe it, right? See somebody do it well and watch them do it and kind of say, okay, this is what I need to do. Then I need to practice, right? So the observation is kind of the study part of it, right? It goes back to what we were saying before. You observe, you study, you learn as much as you can from watching others or reading up on it, and then you practice it over and over again. And so whether it's speaking, public speaking, or anything like that, that's really, how I've gone about it, to observe, practice, and then perform, right? And then execute. A lot of people want to go straight to that execution stage. And so a lot of people who want to join the AND campaign, things like that, they want to jump right in and they want to do the stuff that looks glamorous, but it's like you haven't observed, you haven't practiced, but you just want to jump in there. And and especially when it comes to politics, that can get you hurt. Politics is a very serious field.
Right.
People, people's lives can be ruined. There are people who are not such nice people in it. So you want to make sure that you're prepared and that you've observed and that you're going about it. Sometimes you got to drive slow, right? Sometimes you got to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Because I've seen people with very good intentions get with the wrong group or the wrong candidate or the wrong team and get drug into, some really unfortunate stuff. I mean, people get arrested. People, can really end up in bad situations if they don't go about it the right way.
Wow. And so who are some people for you coming up and even presently that you observe, who you really admire, just the work that they've done?
Oh yeah. So a lot of them are local people, but local councilmen, so the dean of the Atlanta City Council was Councilman C.T. Martin, who, was somebody who was part of the civil rights movement and all that. And he really taught me just to have, that passion for the people had to come first. I had it in me, but I kind of let it get clouded by the, just win and all that stuff. And so he helped me out with that. I think Representative Barbara Jordan, Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, a politician that I looked up to because of her. She was very sober in her thinking, very serious, but went about things in a way that with the utmost integrity. That's big. I would say, somebody that I've learned a lot about within the last probably 10 years is Fannie Lou Hamer.
I've seen you post a lot about her.
But just how she went about advocacy and how she put God first and didn't feel like, and here's one thing I really want to tell people when it comes to politics, don't feel like you have to fit into the progressive or conservative mold.
That's hard.
Be courageous enough to be different, and people aren't going to like it, but that's how you're really going to make change. If you just fall into the mold and become a cookie cutter, progressive or conservative, the chances of you changing things get pretty low because you're just kind of following the crowd. Be bold enough to do it differently.
Be courageous enough to be different.